Um, so we, our genesis, we are about 5 years old now in our journey. So we're not like super old legacy investor, but our genesis primarily happened from a singular insight that if you want to play, the India domestic consumption story, which is because of all demographic dividends and all the other macro factors, a very robust story for the next 25, 30 years, then the places to play it are maybe three: uh, consumer, healthcare, and financial services. What we realized was that, or what Manu realized when he started Sauce, was that consumer was a space which was obviously a lot more interesting personally, and is an area where uh, there's a very clear switch happening, which is something that is in two or three forms. One is there's a very clear move happening from unorganized local unbranded consumption to branded consumption. The second is there is a move happening from old legacy brands, which are large incumbents and market leaders, but not necessarily innovating much, and you know with the newer generation, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, moving towards a much more a much more new age kind of a consumption, conscious consumption sort of a route. And the third sort of a thing that's happened in the last 10 years is India's consumer stack has truly come of its own. So we have a consumer business infrastructure and ecosystem in India which is unparalleled globally. Whether it is payments, whether it is quick commerce, whether it is e-commerce, uh, you know, uh, 4G penetration, all of these things are, in a way, creating a massive tailwind for consumer businesses. So it kind of made sense for us to play consumer. Where it started as a thesis, and where we are today at Sauce is we believe that the our sweet spot lies at inception of consumer brands. So we have, from 2019 till date, we have back 25 consumer brands, and some of them are brand enablers, some of them are marketplaces, and a couple of tech plays, but largely consumer brands. And most of these have been idea stage pre-revenue investments. The reason for that is we feel that's the stage at which uh, a genuinely conscious value add investor can add the most amount of value to a business. And if you look at this screen, all of these brands, um, apart from maybe 10x, which was an existing business, all of these have been at idea stage or maybe a few months into existence. So we've been first check and pure conviction lead investors ourselves. We've never really relied on के अरे यार कोई और कर रहा है बहुत hot deal है हम भी कर लेते हैं. We are very clear that we form our own convictions, and that allows us to sort of play a fairly long journey with these brands. So generally, three things that kind of define us. One is we are very focused. So in the last 5 years, we are currently investing from our third seed fund. So in three seed funds, we have 25 companies so far, and maybe at the end of the third seed fund we'll be at about 30, 35 or 36, which is a very sort of you know gradual cadence. We are not in the 10, 15, 20 investments a year kind of a space, and that allows us to just be very specific and very focused. And we only do consumer, so we've stayed away from web3, crypto, AI, SaaS, all of those things. We are very clear we will do what we understand and what we think has long term legs and our ability to add value. um, the second piece is we are fairly disciplined. We keep our funds very small. We write small first checks. Our first checks are, 2 to 3 crores, 4 crores, or maybe 5 crores at times. And we kind of keep our discipline of entering very early. We sort of look to do that. And the last piece is we, because we are doing one and two, we've been able to stay relevant to the brands that we work with. The reason I'm kind of covering all of this is it's also important to understand when when you guys are looking at a fundraise journey, uh, how investors think about their own, their own business and their own stack of investments. So we built a very deep ecosystem, and there's something that maybe I can talk about with a couple of examples when we sort of go further. But our ecosystem consists of advisors, partners for building any kind of a support system to a consumer brand, to having partnerships with uh, with all platforms, whether it's distribution, advertising, marketing, all of it, right? So that's the core of it. And I think maybe one takeaway from this is, uh, because we are because we are so specifically focused on consumer, there's also a you know there's also a very conscious way in which we've structured our brand in terms of what we offer, who we are for, very clearly who's our consumer, so to say, customer, and how we want to do business, so that it allows uh, a fairly clear exchange on both sides. Current to your question, the specific reason for backing companies pre-revenue, and I think that is a very clean segue into the next section itself, which is, uh, it's about the value proposition that we offer. So our value proposition works perfectly well with pre-revenue, or like you said, super early revenue. So when we look at early revenue, like maybe 20 lakhs, 50 lakhs, sometimes even a crore, uh, we don't look at these businesses as revenue generating, but we look at them as super early businesses where we can work with the founders and and build it alongside. So our general thesis is, the best founding teams will be maybe a 7 out of 10 in terms of the 10 things that you require to build a successful consumer brand. And our way of working is, we like to have a conversation with the founders to identify the three that are possibly missing, and have a clear path on how we can help to bridge that, so that Sauce plus the founder becomes a 10 on 10, and hence increases the probability of outcome. One thing about outcomes is that, you know between Manu and me, out of the 10 businesses or brands that we back, including Sauce and pre-Sauce, uh, we have a 70% hit rate of taking businesses to 150 crore revenue and above. So we can only achieve that if we are basically doing this in a very, very focused manner. So I don't know if there are 10 things, but let me get to the rest of the presentation, which is the more important part of it. Uh, so the first thing that any business requires, or any consumer brand requires, is a very, very sharp clarity of the value proposition or of the insight on the business. And I put a couple of examples on the screen, because these are two that are very sharply done, but I can actually cover a bunch more. So we invested in both of these businesses pre-revenue, pre-launch. The whole truth at inception was called "and nothing else," but the insight was exactly this: that consumers don't trust their food because there's a lot of convenient half truths told to them. There's a lot of mis-selling. A lot of things are sold as healthy. A lot of things are sold as no sugar, but actually end up, when you read the fine print, it ends up having a lot of that. So and this brand got built out of a personal insight of the founder, who went through multiple, Shashank went through multiple journeys of gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, and he used to run his own fairly popular blog called Fitshit. So while it started with just one snack bar, the insight on the brand was very clear, that there's a very, very clear gap in the food industry, which is that there's a large audience today which is becoming conscious about what they are consuming, and are not able to get the right product with the right price at the right taste, right? So he started off with the category which was small but very, very sharp, and built from there. And today, it's a very large revenue business with leading in multiple categories. Similarly, Mokobara, when we invested when they had basically the prototype of their first cabin bag, and the insight that they had was uh, travel in India over the next, if you were to play the young demographic of India for the next, let's say, 10, 20 years, one of the biggest things that's going to happen is travel, both domestic and international. And travel has transformed from being going from point A to point B to becoming in itself an experience. And with the advent of social media, this is getting cataloged. And if you look at the premium brands that exist today, which is that existed in 2020 when Mokobara started, the there was Samsonite at the top, which exclusively catered to business travelers, and hence boring blacks and grays and blues, but very high quality. And then there were the legacy VIP and Safari businesses, and this is before Safari actually broke out, which have been in existence for like 50 years and are very happy to just give you, you know, your first branded suitcase. Okay. And the young consumer does not like either of them. The young consumer wants to have a very colorful, high quality product which becomes a part of their travel experience and is always front of camera. So that's where the Mokobara insight came. So I think both of these come around. So Whole Truth was a consumer insight around a you know more latent consumer need gap, and Mokobara was a very tangible price gap also in the market. So you had the Samsonite at a 15-20,000 rupee price point, and you had the VIP Safari at a 5,000 rupee price point. And even though people wanted to upgrade from the VIP Safari, they had nothing in the middle. But to get to that upgrade, you need to have a really great product, and we'll come to that. But so both of these insights are not very complex in terms of this is the exact product spec that no one is doing. I have this one molecule that will change the world and everything. They are very simple insights saying that uh, people are feeling cheated, and people people spend a lot on their appearance and on their entire travel stack, but they don't have anything attractive in their travel goods space. And the second thing is that both of these insights kind of go beyond a very immediate singular product category. So Whole Truth, although it started and nothing else with protein bars, the insight applies to pretty much everything, right? It's the ability to construct a product for that which matters, but that insight applies to you know breakfast, that insight applies to chocolates, that insight applies to snacks, chips, everything, right? And we've seen that with Food Farmer, and with Mokobara, that insight of you know very nice looking sturdy travel accessories goes beyond hard luggage or suitcases, goes and now goes all the way into ladies handbags. And I mean, I see there are quite a few ladies on the panel. How many of you would ever carry a VIP Safari or a Samsonite handbag, right? But Mokobara has actually been able to create a niche in the handbag category without doing a new brand. So if you look at all the conventional businesses, they will have VIP did Caprese, or I think was it VIP or someone else. They did Caprese. There's Lavi. There's all of these brands which become separate brands outside of their core category because their core brand is not able to transcend. So the great brands will be able to actually transcend beyond their immediate category. Then the second thing that obviously one looks for in the at the super early stage, because when you do an investment, and current, since you do a lot of personal investments, you would know this. uh, we don't know what's going to happen in the execution, right? What we do know is that there's a team which has a great right to win, uh, and you back the team, and then you take the execution risk, right? So just a couple of examples here. Yogesh, who was our first investment in the apparel space, and from Fund One, is a second generation textile family, comes from a textile family in Surat. Uh, you know, Fabrics, garments, the thread count and the quality of a particular type of fabric is breakfast table conversation. And he decided to come back and do a brand, whereas his family business is textiles trading. And It took us about almost 6 months to have a clear conversation about what's the insight and what he's going to build, right? Uh, Similarly, with Innovist, where Rohit, Sifat, and Vimal all come with very, very sharp expertise in their own, specific uh, domains, which put together builds a very exciting, consumer brand play. So Vimal is a proper scientist. He's done product development for J&J levers. Sifat has done a lot of work on brand, and Rohit has himself built a successful uh, uh,
Consumer business.
UPC brand before this, right? So that's the you kind of look for a a little bit of relevant expertise. So, and the relevant expertise also goes back to the previous point, which is what is the sharp insight. See, the one of the things that founders or the great founders do well is they spend so much time going so deep into their category, understanding the product gaps and understanding the consumer, that it allows them to really come up with an actually sharp 10x better product, right? And because and the other thing is that they are super passionate about that space. So Shashank is insanely passionate about food as a space, right? Uh, he's been doing that for 10 years and on a personal journey. uh, Rohit has been doing BPC for so long. He's super passionate about that. For Yogesh, apparel is all that he wants to do, especially the men's innerwear space. Then we look at founders. Some of the recent founders we've backed, Hoko Ice Creams. That family's been doing ice creams for 70 years, right? Uh, then you look at Super Tales, where all of the three founders are extremely passionate about e-commerce, and very importantly about pets. They all have pets. They're all pet parents. They're very, very passionate about building for that. So a passion for the problem and a specific expertise in that is generally a very great combo. Now, does this mean that founders who are not from the sector cannot do that? uh, you may or may not have point one of this, but point two is kind of table stakes. If you're not super duper passionate, and this is a consumer business, so if you're not super passionate about the problem that you're trying to solve, then it's very hard to get super deep and build that product, right? So that's the second sort of a thing. The third sort of natural thing beyond this is how your ability as a founding team to actually convert or create 10x better products out of the proposition and insights that you have. So this is the culmination of the first two things, right? And what a lot of founders who generally come to us at a pre-rev stage with just an idea tend to ignore is, uh, you know, even at a pre-revenue stage, you need to have your product. You need to have a very clear definition of your product, at least, where you can build a 10x better product to the existing available consumer product at the right price. Now, you may be at a premium to the market, but there has to be a willingness of the consumer to pay that premium, and that comes from how significantly better your product is. So, when Whole Truth launched, their protein bar was hands down the best bar in the market, right? They've just launched protein powders, hands on the best sort of lightest protein powder that you could get. Mokobara, their bags at a any of the price points that they operate in, 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 rupees, significantly outperform the competition, which is nearly 2x that price. uh, Coco ice creams, again, a bit of an exception, but when they launched, the 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 thought that went into each of these products, into the recipes, into the fat content in the ice creams, into investing in machines to do the product here, which is a ball top cone, which is generally built by hand by most of the brands, uh, is a testament to the fact that you want to build that 10x product. Because when you are launching a product into the market, and when you are trying to break into either a very large incumbents market or into a market where people are generally sort of indifferent and buy what is available, right, from e-commerce, the how sharply different your product is actually going to build your brand. Yes, there's going to be a lot of brand story. You do very nice packaging, you do all of that, but ultimately the product needs to perform, and it needs to perform significantly better. Because a poor product will ultimately get you a few trials, and then it'll sort of fall off. And that is what we have seen as a difference between some of our successful bets and some of our not so successful bets. So we've had cases where founders have not been able to build a 10x better product, or have been able to build a 10x better product but at a price that you know far overshot where the market would be at, and that doesn't work. So I think a part of the product proposition, very clearly for most founders to keep in mind, is the pricing. And you know it's sometimes an easy cope to say, okay, when we get to scale, we will be able to reduce pricing, and we'll sort of optimize our inputs. Uh, in that case, the general sort of suggestion is, because that's not something I've covered on a slide, is then even if you have an expensive product to start with, you need to find an audience for which that product is sort of you know bang on what they want and are willing to pay for it. So you may launch, let's say, you may launch a brand which has uh, white linen shirts for 5,000 rupees. But then you need to go and find that consumer who's going to buy a 5,000 rupee white linen shirt, and make sure that in that small niche market, you are the king. Because if you build that brand there, and then once you slowly start optimizing your pricing, etc., you will ultimately have some sort of a right to win, right? The ideal thing to do is, if you think the market's at 1,500 or 2,000, you build the best product at 1,500, 2,000, and you build the packaging and the branding to support it, so that you are able to win that. But if not, then you have to go and target that audience. You can't say that your audience is the 1,500, 2,000 rupee consumer, and your product is a 4,000, 5,000 rupee product, and you will somehow figure out a way to get them to converge. That is generally not happening, right? So and this is something we've seen across the board. uh, and for founders who are at an early stage, my suggestion is to find this pricing sweet spot as early as as you can, before you can you know before you can scale it. Because that'll come to my one of my next points, which is the economics of it. um, to answer your question, Karan, I don't think there's a very clear benchmark per se. I think this would come out from a sharp understanding of the category. And so you'll have some categories which are so deep that you'll have markets at every price band. Okay. And then you'll have some categories jahan pe the
I think Yash dropped out. Guys, please feel to ask any questions that you may have. I think some great points around how do you kind of build insights into your categories. How do you kind of price? How do you kind of build a 10x proposition, right? So like you can ask him around how does he look at what kind of focus groups he does on identifying pricing. Like how does he validate a 10x product? How does he validate whether a customer would like to pay for that product, if it's essentially if I'm Jenny, Nimisha, Tanya, you can also maybe get your insights validated.
Karan, can you hear me?
We can.
Hey, Karan, can you hear me? Hello.
We can.
Okay,
We
cool. So
can.
I'm going to, while the other one kind of comes on. Um, so I don't know where you guys lost me, so I can continue from there.
I think you were talking about the 10x product, proposition, and then figuring out, whether customers, figuring out the right price point, which the customers would be willing to pay at, and you're talking about how deep a category is and
Yes, yes.
different price
So
points is.
the category needs to be very, very clearly understood by the team in terms of, you know, does there is there a large enough market at each of these price points, and how far away from your core consumer are you landing in terms of your pricing? So a simple rule of thumb is, consumers will be willing to pay about 20 to 30% premium for a product, uh, which is in a mass market kind of a category. Consumers will pay 20 to 30% premium for a product that is significantly better, because that's a volume game, right? In, let's say, a more uh, sorry yeah, so in categories which are, let's say, a little more deep and not necessarily mass market, like for example, it could be luggage, it could be um, baby gear, it could be electronics, where there is a high level of aspiration attached to owning products. There, new price points can be unlocked. uh, Also applies for personal care as a category, for example, right? So if you have, uh, you know you will have mass price personal care products, you'll have super premium ones, and then you'll have price bands in the middle, where you can create, uh, you can create a market, or you can create a brand if your product is sharply differentiated and very high, and delivers significantly higher output than the conventional incumbents. So I think you ought to look at it as two different categories. For categories which are pure consumption and not aspiration, I think 20-30% is the premium that you would genuinely be able to command before uh, market size starts shrinking significantly. And this is again, you know, a little bit of a 50,000 feet view. There will be exceptions to this, obviously, but I mean, on a general rule, if you're looking at those kinds of things. So if you look at food, for example, whether it's ice creams, whether it's snacks, उसमें तो some mass categories will be such that you can't even go 10% beyond, because it's coinage linked. Uh, but if you are, let's say, doing a breakfast mix, right? There you may be able to go 20-30% premium to an MTR, for example, if you have a significantly differentiated proposition with a much better taste, right? You look at a category like luggage, you look at a category like maybe watches, right, which have aspiration also attached to it. There you can go maybe 2x of the existing product, if you have a significantly better product, and more importantly, if there is an existing category of a decent size above your pricing. So see, if you have a market size of, you know 10,000 at a price point X, and a market size of 1,000 at a price point 5x, you can always assume that if you go to a 3x, there will be a market size more than X and less than 5x. But if there is a 10,000 market size at the price X, and then at 5x there's no market, then at 3x, making an assumption that there'll be a significantly large market is a untested and a fairly, that requires a lot of work. So that's on the proposition piece.
I think Lavanya had a question.
Yeah, go on, Love. Sorry.
Yes. Hi, Yash. So I think this was regarding when we're talking about, say, in the premium category. So I'll take an example of one of your portfolio companies, say, Macopra, right? So it's price, it's kind of in between, say, the mid premium and then like the very, very luxury or like premium category between your Samsonite and the VIP. But as you're scaling that, say you find your consumer, and in the initial days, I feel like finding that niche is still at the risk of sounding, a little off base, but it's a little still a little easier. But when you're scaling, and I feel like once, say, as a brand, as a consumer brand, especially if you do figure out that there is a market in that niche, there are also, especially in our country, copycat brands that do come up at a smaller, at a lower price point, or even other brands who realize that this category is worth investing in. So when you're scaling and you are at that premium price point, even though you may have a few players that may be above you, any learnings or experiences from that? Because I think that's a piece of the puzzle, as you know, since my brand is definitely in more of the premium category. Once you're scaling, maintaining that value proposition, but also reaching the kind of revenue goals that you are aiming for, I guess that play was something that I was curious to hear your thoughts on.
Got it. So just hold that thought. Let me just again
Sure.
connect from the PC. I'm back on that, and let me come back to you on this. Just hey. So, pretty good question, Lavanya. I think the answer to that comes in two pieces.
Okay.
One is uh, one is how strong a brand and community have you built, which allows you to have a certain base loyalty and gives you a little more time than a little more time to react to competition coming in and either being copycats or otherwise. And the second part of it actually comes from your supply chain. How much of genuine differentiation have you built into your supply chain?
Mhm.
So why do you not see a Mokobara hard luggage copycat in the market today? Right, there is a lot of work that they've done at the back end to ensure that they have a significant lead before someone else can come and replicate that.
Mhm.
Right, so you got to work on that, uh, especially if you are going to be in a premium category. uh, the 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 one risk that you mentioned is always there, which is you unlock a market by doing the work and figuring out that yes, there's a market at this price point, and then someone else comes and starts copying you, and that automatically starts reflecting in your ROAS. It starts reflecting in confusion for consumers, etc. But one is you have to be if you are the leader in that particular category, you have to be innovating much faster and harder than anyone else. And second is you need to build that supply chain differentiation. So you need to have the core part of your particular product or brand in house.
Mm.
So I can take an example of, let's say, a product like Innovist, right? It's a very crowded category, and it's very difficult to create differentiation in a BPC category today because यार niacinamide, salicylic acid, hyaluronic acid, सब लगा सकते हैं, right? It's very easy to procure. It's very easy to figure out the formulations.
Mhm.
So what they do, they keep their manufacturing and R&D in house.
Oh, well.
Right? So they do a little bit of differentiation in every product, and you have to figure out what is it that the consumer is going to really appreciate, right? And the second thing is then you also build your brand a certain way.
Mm.
So you build your brand in a manner where if someone else can offer one product, the you know the breadth of your brand is such that the consumer does not wish to go out of your brand. And so you look at something like a Mokobara, for example. Mokobara has now built a cult brand, right? So in the last 4 years, what they've spent a huge amount of effort in, uh, which also happens to be one of my you know uh, further slides, is in really building a very sharp brand and a very strong connection with your consumers.
Mm.
So I think that is absolutely a key. If you are, let's say, contract manufacturing from a third party where you don't own the formulation, and uh, you're the first to market with, let's say, a premium product, right? the chances of you getting, the chances of the market catching up with you are very, very high.
And just one follow-up question on that, just in terms of what you just mentioned regarding building a stronger brand and presence in the market. What I noticed personally, as again a D2C brand founder that found their start on social media, I think getting the shift from being that more Instagram driven brand to entering the big leagues. That is, of course, something that I think we're figuring out as and when we go, as these brands are maturing and growing up, right? Something that I noticed with Mokobara was a lot of investment in maybe more of the brand awareness, the kind of like a throwback to the olden days of that golden advertising period, working with a lot of like these movie launches, Bollywood players, more for, I would think, just to lead brand awareness as compared to the usual kind of campaigns that would be geared towards conversions or clicks. So
Yeah.
just in your experience, was that something that worked well for the purpose of building that brand and even solidifying, like becoming the face of that price point in that category? Just that was something that I was curious about.
I think it did. And some of the movie collabs and all is more recent, but
Mhm.
what they really did well initially was, you know, social in terms of
Yeah.
creators, influencers. Uh, a lot of their content, and you'd be super surprised at the kind of costs at which they're able to generate that content.
Yeah.
So, and you sort of have it's an iterative process generally, but sometimes, and in case of Mokobara, for example, Naveen comes from a very deep experience of design and brand,
Mhm.
right? So he used to head design and brand for Uber, and we worked before that. So there was a very sharp understanding of that target consumer and how you could build you know a really relevant brand for them.
Mhm.
So I think that's yes, it did work a lot for them, and a lot of what genuinely worked for them was their product.
Mm.
Because they built such a good product, the amount of organic you know visibility that they got with people just making their own content, tagging them,
Mhm.
is what gave them the initial impetus. And then obviously, yes, they were really good at capitalizing on it.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's really helpful.
Perfect. So I think once you figured out your proposition, and you know figured a way of translating that proposition into a great product, the next piece, which is I think the most critical for most businesses, is the unit economics. And I think one of the trap that, because of maybe the fact that most of the investments generally get led by tech investors, that people fall in is this concept of LTV, that I will make money on my third, fourth, fifth transaction, that we will have a high LTV and my consumers will come and buy repeat from me, and I'll make it over third, fourth, fifth. This works in a few cases. It works when you are a marketplace, very, very deep marketplace, where consumers have to necessarily come and repeat with you. So, for example, this might work for a first try, uh, but it's very hard to make this work for individual brands. You need to figure out a way that you are transaction level positive, which is your CM2. Uh, I mean, and so that kind of uh, means that you need to work backwards from saying that your target is to be a certain level of profitability. And I think the beauty of consumer businesses genuinely is that the economics are known. If you want to build a luggage brand, you can go and look at VIP's or Safari's balance sheet online. You'll know exactly what their raw material costs are. You'll know exactly what their working capital requirement is. You will know how much they spend on marketing. You will know what their profitability is. And hence, you know that if you are doing a business like that, and if you're doing a more premium brand, then you should definitely be able to land at a higher profitability than where an incumbent is, right? And this would broadly apply to most categories. In most categories, you will find a scaled counterpart to your business, and you will be able to study and dissect that business to arrive at what the right economics for your business should look like. And I think that the time to genuinely be cognizant of that and be be building towards it is already day zero. So while you may not, or you will never be necessarily CM2 positive on day zero, but you need to know what is your path to get to that unit economics break even. Because if you're not able to get there, no matter how good a packaging, how good a branding you are building, the ultimate truth is that you are paying consumers to buy a product, and that's not a sustainable thing at all, right? So uh, Ashwini, I'll just come to you in like 10 seconds. Let me just finish a couple of the other points on this. So the first point is about margins. uh, I think you should be very cognizant about what the gross margin profile of your category is when you get in, and how are you able to build a better gross margin product than the incumbent. Unless you are applying in an absolute mass market category where you're saying you're going to go in and disrupt with pricing or margins and make up by scaling, which is a super high risk strategy, because that means that you know uh, you're going to take on a much better funded and capitalized incumbent in a price war. uh, you should always be looking at having a better gross margin than a category. Uh, Obviously, you can always account for economies of scale. So today you are getting small MOQs, and tomorrow your MOQs will increase. That will automatically get your gross margin where it has to be. That is fine. But to say that मैं बाद में pricing से manage कर लूंगा या कुछ is a dangerous one. So you need to be very clear about gross margins. Generally, high gross margins allow you to invest a lot into your supply chain, into your branding, and the way to look at gross margin is honestly is you select the right business that you want to be in. Uh, if you are in a 40% gross margin business, which is a lowish price point category, unless you are a super high volume business, you're not going to be able to make money ever. So that's the, and obviously your choice of channel matters a lot, right? So you built a product where, you know, on your own website you can make 50%, 60% GM, but the minute you start trying to sell this on a marketplace, after marketplace commissions and logistics costs, your GM comes down to 40%. Then you also need to be cognizant of that, and whether that's going to make your ultimate P&L work. And the North Star metric for us, and what we have seen most of our founders do very well, at least the successful ones, is CM2 break even. You've got to achieve CM2 break even as quickly as possible, and definitely before you start hyperscaling. Because if you are not CM2 positive and you are trying to push growth very aggressively, uh, you're going to end up with a leaky boat, and that's going to be a very, very tough situation to recover from. So I think that's the unit economics, making sure your gross margins work out perfectly, which means if you need to invest a little bit into a certain kind of technology or manufacturing setup which allows you that gross margin and it's financially sustainable, then please do. And second is, make sure that your CM2 convergence is happening soon. If it's not happening, then you have a very clear and honest introspection on whether you are hitting PMF or not. Yeah, Ashwini, your question.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So, first of all, I really wanted to thank such a good insight. So, this is the first kind of a webinar that I'm attending today. So, I just wanted to ask, like, I just started a brand called Freedom Fabric, and we are into men's and women garments and all. Uh, I wanted to know about like how to really, as you mentioned about how to really set the price, like, na, the fabric which I'm using is something very different. Like, no, this is a khadi fabric, but then it is a totally a different kind of fabric, which is totally hand woven, hand spun, and there is hardly any competition for me in the market. But it is a
Hmm.
premium brand which I am actually setting for it. So I just wanted to know, like, how to really set the price which I am actually targeting. Now, because there is no competition, I don't know what kind of price I should like. For example, in your case, you have different kind of, already, good, like companies are there. But in
Hmm.
my case, there is nothing as such where I need to find out any kind of competition like this kind of a price or what kind of a price. For example,
Yeah.
you mentioned about a
Yes,
linen shirt price.
got it. So I think the first kind of fallacy that you are talking about is that there's no competition. If there's no competition, there's no market. So ऐसा तो नहीं है कि लोग बिना शर्ट के घूम रहे हैं. So if you are making a really high quality shirt, then find what is the consumer that you want to sell to buying today, and what price are they paying for it, and how much better is your product as compared to that. And like I said, if you can build an aspirational brand, you can charge maybe a significant premium to that. But knowing that there also has to be a sort of a category above you in pricing, which has a decent market size. uh, if you are going to do, let's say, a much better quality daily wear, or a linen shirt, then you look at, so you'll see, you have multiple. If you are doing a certain kind of linen, right, you have base level पे you will have maybe a Zudio, right, or a Max. उसके ऊपर में you'll have a Zara, उसके ऊपर में you'll have, let's say, Andaman, उसके ऊपर में you might have a Brooks Brothers or something, and उसके ऊपर में you'll have a Hugo Boss. So there are brands at every category. Now you need to figure out कि आपको कौन से category में खेलना है, and then you price according to that, according to what the consumer would be willing to pay, and your ability to build a brand, and and to actually build that brand in that category for that consumer. So it's a in the entire question that you asked me, Ashwini, I didn't hear the consumer at all. मेरे को आप बता रहे हो कि आपने बहुत अच्छा प्रोडक्ट बनाया है, but does the consumer want it? So you need to go and test it with the consumer, and you need to actually find which is the consumer who's willing to buy that product, and then how do you price it for him such that your margins work out. The basic bottom up way of building it is to say, price it at a 3x or a 4x of your cost, so that if you get to a 2x ROAS, you still have some money left for logistics and marketplace, etc. Right? But you know, that's a very arithmetic way of doing it. But that doesn't tell you if there's a market for it, if there's a consumer for it or not. So as a consumer founder, right, if you are building a consumer brand, you have to absolutely start consumer first. Uh, you're not selling a new टेक्नोलॉजी पर से सेइंग कि मैंने एक बहुत अच्छा नया बैटरी टेक बनाया है, एंड आई विल गो एंड convince the existing battery tech users to switch to my battery tech. That category creation ain't happening by super early stage startups without a deep balance sheet and the ability to burn a lot of money. So does that answer your question, Ashwini?
Yeah, I think the only thing, as you mentioned about, definitely like people have different kind of, people is not. The only thing is that what I have actually in a confusion kind of a thing, that I'm already into this business, but till I was already doing offline only. From past 15 years, I'm doing offline, and there is a consumer for my product, and I just like 6 months back, I just come on the online only.
Hmm.
But I have that thing that I know that consumer is there for my product, but then at what price should I, so that now, because like when we are doing offline, so there are many things, many now you don't like I was just selling on a very normal price, but then when you are coming on a platform like such, where you really wanted to make a kind of a brand actually,
No, but
basically.
the same product, why would a consumer online pay much higher than offline for it?
Well, because there is you will hardly get you will not get this such kind of a product in the market, है ना?
बट आप ही
मतलब I
ऑफलाइन
am,
मिल रहा है ना कहीं पे, तो
हाँ जी,
आप ऑफलाइन बेच रहे हो ना वो प्रोडक्ट, तो वो कहीं ना कहीं तो मिल रहा है ना.
नहीं ऑफलाइन बेच रहे हैं, but that is hardly, है ना? Suppose like I am in Delhi, so it is hardly like I am just catering for, I think, some few hundred or thousands of people are like I am just doing it, and
My
that is also.
So Ashwini, the point is, if your consumer is willing to pay X for your product offline, right? After physically seeing that product, why would he pay 2x or 1.5x online for that product. You will be able to get some consumers who will maybe like a certain kind of a website tonality that you build. But again, I don't see a reason why you should have a significantly differential pricing for it.
Just to like, because there are so many expenses like now, because it is a
No,
very new market for me.
Ashwini, your expenses are your problem, na? Consumer का problem थोड़ी ना है वो.
That is fine.
So it is not a user's problem, right? A consumer's problem. आज के दिन में आपको आके जियो बोलेगा कि मेरा expenses बहुत ज्यादा है, आप मेरे को 2,000 रुपए per month दो, 300 रुपए की जगह पे, आप दोगे नहीं दोगे ना? You switch to Airtel.
Mm-hmm.
So a consumer is going to pay what the consumer ascribes as value to the product, and that will happen as a discovery by either comparing it with the existing product that the consumer buys, or by somehow being able to create a really high value proposition or a perception. So anyways, we can take the rest of it offline, Ashwini.
Thank you.
Tanya
Thank
has
you.
been waiting, sorry.
I'm conscious of the time as well, Yash. So maybe like we can take a couple of questions and then maybe you have a couple of slides as well to.
Yeah, I just have like a couple more slides, so we'll finish this quickly.
Hi, Yash. So, Yash, I'm building a brand called Mama Life, and we are a protein supplements brand for breastfeeding moms. And the insight which I had was this is after both my deliveries that feeding moms need an additional 17 grams of protein in their diet, and which they're not getting. And this is according to ICMR. And I'm
Yeah.
building for that. Now, I've done some work on the market size as well. There are 17 million urban pregnancies which are happening every year in India. And out of that, according to survey, 40% of these moms suffer from postpartum fatigue, for which I'm trying to solve. Now, the question I have is that, as a, VC, is this insight exciting? And secondly, because protein is already a very cluttered market, uh, how do I kind of stand out in my value prop? Because in terms of the product, like you already know, there is very less innovation that's possible in this space. However,
Exactly.
the only thing which I can do is I can really become the voice of the customer. I can talk to them, appeal to them, because most of the protein brands are talking to athletes, or like Shashank is trying to solve with the whole truth. But there's nobody talking to feeding moms. So, what is your thought on this business, and how do I become more attractive to the customers?
I think you got to build it. So one is obviously the product differentiation is a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the second piece is you need to build it with a very, very sharp GTM on being able to target new moms and figure out what problem you can solve for them. If just supplementing protein is the problem you're solving for them, then you'll have two types of consumers, right? Women who are already consuming protein and
Yeah.
women who don't consume protein.
Yeah.
So women who are already consuming protein will have a brand that they prefer that sort of suits them, right? Women who don't consume protein, then how are you making it less intimidating or more palatable for them to sort of enter your brand? The other thing that I feel is which is a challenge for this category is, yeah, while I put on the slide that LTV doesn't matter, but you know having an audience that sort of buys into your brand long term is very, very important. uh, Lactating moms is a revolving door, right? The max time you'll have with one patient is maybe 6 months, and in
Yeah.
6 months you'll maybe take 2 or 3 max bottles.
Yeah.
So you are on a constant customer acquisition and churn funnel.
Okay. Hmm.
So either you have a fairly big uh,
Mm-hmm.
assortment of products to offer to that mom within a finite period, where
Yeah.
the customer acquisition cost gets amortized over multiple products, or you have to uh, really figure out कि उसका economics कैसे बैठेगा.
Okay. Another follow-up question. So one idea is that I only look at protein shakes, which is the first product I've launched, and kind of create different variations in this. Or I look at protein bars plus shakes plus laddus. Like, how would you suggest I should go about it? Like,
I think
looking
you
at
gotta
the
really check with your audience, yaar. Matlab, um, I can tell you there are so many different, nuskas happening. So,
Mhm.
you know, I've recently had a kid, so my wife is maybe your TG, but
Okay.
there's just so much stuff there.
Yeah.
So many things that everyone keeps telling you. Your doctor will prescribe you a protein. Uh,
Mhm.
your home diet is controlled by your mother or your mother-in-law, and there's
Yeah.
so many different things happening. It is a very tough piece to break into
Yeah.
the, break through to the consumer and get them to
Mhm.
really genuinely consume your product. So I think what you'll have to do is you'll have to actually talk to a lot of your consumers and figure out if there's a very sharp pain point that you can solve for from a consumer lens.
Okay. Understood.
Top down going in, it's a tough one.
Okay.
Yeah, Saksham, I think. Sorry.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you, first of all, for the amazing presentation. I had a follow-up from Ashwini's question, actually. When you're an offline entrepreneur and when the SOM is highly restricted, or you've built a niche product which restricts the SOM to a few customers, let's say in a very particular area of Delhi, so let's say South Delhi or something, how does the price then get changed? Does it because you gave the example of market size evaluation when you are estimating it to 5x, and 5x is, let's say, restricting like the whole customer base to a lot. Then you said like 3x would be a reasonable assumption. So
No, no,
what
I'm
would
not saying it's a reasonable assumption. I'm just kind of giving you a very, very, you know, it's more of an anecdotal thing. But
Mhm.
yeah, you have to genuinely go deep into understanding your consumer and figure out कि वो वाला जो persona है और वो जो TG है, how scalable is that यार? मतलब इंडिया में बहुत ज्यादा heterogeneous consumer भी नहीं होता है, unless it is something very specific like food. मतलब आप pickle बेच रहे हो कोई north का या north east का तो अलग बात है. But otherwise,
Yeah,
should be able to draw an extrapolation of how large your consumer base should be when you take this online, and about how well you are able to do the GTM for that.
right. Because like when you go, the brand can have a option to go international or have a GI tag or something of its own. So that was like a confusion that if
Yeah,
they,
it is a very different conversation. We can take that later
yeah,
because it's a very different market with very different regulations, with very different GTMs. Everything is completely different there, right? So,
right.
but that's maybe a different conversation. So, anyways, we'll come back to this maybe towards the end if we have time. Jenny, you had a question.
Yeah, hi Yash. Thank you for the insightful session. I know we're running short of time, so I'm going to make it quick. I'm building J. We're trying to build the raiment for women in India. Now with our product, we've been doing this since more than a year. We've got a good product market fit. We know customers love what we do, but there are multiple positioning or multiple USPs that we have.
Hmm.
Say for example, A, we are size inclusive, so that's one. B, our quality is also superior.
Hmm.
C, we also offer personalization options in terms of customizations, etc.
Hmm.
And then we also, focus a lot on styles. Now, apparel is any which ways a space is that's a little subjective. And when you want to push the brand and you want to like call it out for something like this, how do you end up marketing for so many multiple positioning points? Because we know that customers love all of this. Some customers love the size inclusivity part of it and they come to us because of
Yeah,
that.
so it's honestly, Jenny, it's a choice which you need to make, and that choice will come from you selecting which audience and which specific proposition you think is the most scalable, and then you go all out on that, so
Hmm.
that you can own that, and over time, that's why you scale your business. So
Hmm.
if you think customization is scalable, which I would assume is not, then you would go on that. If you think plus size is a big gap which no one else is doing,
Hmm.
which again is a question, right? So you need to actually identify which one most of your consumers resonate with, and for which you see a larger right to win in the market that you have not yet tapped, and then you keep going, keep
Got
building
it.
on that, right? So that's the way. We are very short on time, so I just have like a couple of slides,
Thank you.
really. uh, So the last piece is that you need to really invest, which is actually an understatement, but it actually is a culmination of all the things that I've said till now. Uh, Building a differentiated brand and product takes a huge amount of time and effort, and in a lot of cases, money. So you need to find the right partners. You need to be able to work with the right partners. You need to convince the right partners to work with you. So an example of that is Whole Truth and Thought Over Design. Thought Over Design is a very selective and very expensive agency, but they chose to work with Shashank from the get go because they absolutely love Shashank's vision for it, right? They've also incidentally done Hoko ice creams. Mokobara, when they wanted to, genuinely build for this category, they went to a very high quality boutique design agency in London to do their product design with a very, very sharp brief. And they spent 6 months building that product. So,
Murama did it, right?
sorry?
Mukubara worked with Murama, right?
Orama, yes. So, and Hoko is also working with Thought Over Design. So, I think you need to, find partners and fans for your brand who are going to contribute to your journey, because it's not something you can do just by yourself. But you need to be the lead for that and really go super deep into it. Building a brand, building a product is not something you can outsource to your team. Uh, and that's something that we have seen always, which becomes the right to win ultimately in the market, right? Either you have a super differentiated product or you got a super high quality, very differentiated brands. Like Hoko operates in a category where the average age of mass priced ice cream brands is 70 years. So very clear gap for building a new age brand. But again, I think Hoko is an exception because they have a lot of capital themselves. The founders themselves have $200 million of capital. Uh, the second point is the best brands are held very closely by the founders, and they're a reflection of the founders themselves. So if you look at a Mokobara and you look at the passion that Sangeet and Naveen put into it, or you look at a Hoko ice creams, and if any of you have seen the barbershop podcast that Manu and Ankit did together, and the passion that Ankit has for each of his ice cream, मतलब 10 रुपए के आइसक्रीम के लिए उसके पास इतना passion है. Same way Shashank for Whole Truth, Jatan and Tushar for Pafora, all of these guys, uh, they live their brand. So you need to have a brand positioning that is very close to you, and that you are able to carry. It's not something that you can outsource to again someone in your team as a marketing person. Sometimes it can work, but it's generally the founder who has to hold it. And how do you know you built a brand is going to reflect in your P&L. Your ROAS is going to keep on improving organically without you doing a lot of new things, and your repeats and organic traffic will kind of keep on improving massively. So that's these are some of my tidbits on what we've seen as an observation of great founders building great brands at a super early stage. What I have not covered in a lot of depth is the GTM. But the GTM is something which is generally very customized to each brand. So that's maybe a conversation that individual founders need to have and go really deep into. It's not something you can cover in an hour. In terms of choice of channels, in terms of choice of packaging, branding, price points, in terms of the choice of what particular market you go after. That's all. And how do you do penetration, how do you do sampling, how do you do everything. So it's a fairly involved conversation for maybe later. And one last thing that is there is execution. um, I think this is again maybe a common theme across, that you need to just be at it for years. Okay, this is going to take years to build a brand, and you have to love it enough to be able to be completely at it relentlessly for years. And uh, one of the things in execution that is uh, underrated but very valuable is building a second line. And that second line, we have seen brands like Whole Truth and Super Tails do magic with EIRs. They bring in young super energetic folks who have very high ownership, and then these guys go in and solve individual problems, build pieces for you. So all of it. So that's it from my side, guys. One last parting thought, which kind of encapsulates the whole piece, is you got to think like scientists. Be very, very meticulous when it comes to identifying your market gaps. Be very, very thorough in terms of thinking, and be very honest, right? A scientist cannot get away with saying, "Meko ye lag raha hai, to ye hoga." It has to be validated by data. It has to be validated by experiment and iteration. Uh, Once you identify that gap, you have to be able to dream like an artist in terms of what your brand's really going to do. What kind of transformation can you really create? How, you know, have a really open canvas on how to build your brand. And once you have the two things in place, execute like a general. Like the discipline of an army general and the strategic planning of an army general is what you need to really go at it. And you do these three things well, hopefully having picked the right space to begin with, I think it should be a good outcome ultimately. So that's it from my side, guys. And I think maybe it's a little longer than anticipated, but thanks so much, guys.
Super relevant, Yash. Thank you so much for your time. I think the last thought is like so amazing and like a great way to kind of end the conversation. I think very insightful session. Yash, would love to add you to our group. Like it's a small founder group only. Like we won't like really bother you and all, but like essentially sometimes if there's like a founder who wants to have some help or just wants to do some brainstorming, would love to ping you another just have your support. But thank you again. Very insightful session, and thanks for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot, guys. All the best on your journeys, and feel free to reach out for specific things later.
Thank you so much, Yash. Yash, I would love to send you one of our protein shakes. I would love some genuine feedback from your wife, since she's an ideal customer right now. And congratulations. Please tell me your baby's name.
He is a boy. His name is Advait.
Oh, wow. Beautiful.
All right. Thanks so much, Tanya. I will we'll sync up separately for this. Yeah.
Sure. All right. Bye.
All right. Take care. Thanks, Yash. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. See you guys. Bye.